Mafia Definitive Edition, a remaster of the classic PC game Mafia, a rather unique game in its design here in 2020. It's an early 6th gen PS2 Xbox era third-person game remastered with the graphics of the 8th gen PS4, but the design more reminiscent of the 7th gen PS3, but we will get into that later in this review. First, I wanna say I never beat the original Mafia. I only played it a little bit as a kid, on my family's XP machine. So if I have any point of reference, I'll make it, but this is mostly a review of this game by itself. Also, not so much of a critic, more of pure opinion, Definitive Edition feels like a bad name for a remaster. I'm being picky, I know, but I don't like it. Makes it look like this is the end of the year release of a game with all its DLC, more than it does a remaster of an old game. Again, not a big deal, but it's just something I thought I would point out. Now, I'm not gonna tease it. I mentioned that I thought the gameplay was of the 7th generation. What did I mean by that? Well, the gameplay is more like Mafia 2 than any other Mafia games. And Mafia 2 was very much a game of its time, simple covert shooting and car chases, and that's the core here too. Sure, there might be some destructible environments, but the core is the same, and well, it's okay. It can definitely feel like more just a means for the story to happen than it really being the main focus of the game. The shooting is passable, as it's not bad, but it's not particularly fun or good either. It is very easy on normal difficulty, even with this game's older medkit system, where your health doesn't regenerate on its own. Most of the fun in these shootouts will mostly come from the interesting environments, being that this game takes place in a period we don't really see much in media anymore, as in the 20s and 30s. Especially in this more greedy and violent perspective. The other big piece of gameplay here is driving, and I think this one is slightly more fun, mostly again to the unique setting, but also because of this setting's unique cars. Cars used to be and drive a lot different, and this game reflects that, creating a new way of driving. Cars are heavier, brakes are weaker, and things like that change the way you drive, and I found that fun, as a nice change of pace, and thankfully it doesn't go too hard into it like the original Mafia game. There is also some slower following missions, but I'm glad to say that this is not a big part of it. Usually you'll be able to drive as fast as you want, even with police system that does punish you for speeding or getting in accidents. But personally, I found it very forgiving, which could have been balanced better, I think, but also think this choice was made to minimize frustration. I think a lot of things in this game got played down because of how infamous they were in the original one. Also, in terms of gameplay, it's important to say that it's very much like the original game, more of a linear game that takes place in an open world than an open world game. During the main story, there isn't anything to do in this open world, missions lead into each other without leaving you open to go explore. Not that there is much to explore in this world. There is a free mode available for you to explore the map and do small activities, but it feels very tacked on, and I doubt many people will get much out of it. Which definitely feels like a half-step, and I definitely would have rather have a full open world with all sort of side missions. But a project like that was probably out of budget for this remake. But personally, I don't think it's a big deal. So now let's talk about the story. It's a Mafia story, but it's also unique in how early it happens in Mafia history. It's much closer to Once Upon a Time in America than it is to Goodfellas. It is from a time when these men went on a lot more unchecked and had a lot more control over society. And that's fine. I think a great story can be told here, but honestly I found this one a bit by the numbers. The story starts at the ending, telling you the whole game is sort of a flashback, and that's not really what makes it predictable, as Mafia stories for the most part all end in a similar way, as storytellers don't really want to condone these people's activity. The problem is really the journey. These mobsters are just mostly unlikable, for me at least. The only likable characters in this game are the ones that aren't in the action, so the characters you only see once in a while in between missions, which again does not make the story bad, just less engaging. At the end of the day, it's not a bad story, but it's also not particularly interesting. It never really tries to do anything new. I know this is a remake of an old game, but even that game I don't think was trying to do anything new in terms of Mafia stories. And like I said, it's not bad, it's just not on the same quality as other Mafia games in this same series. Which is a shame, because this is the main focus of the game and it is what's pushing you forward to finish it. But I will say, because no story beat is frustratingly bad, and because it does have its moments, and because the gameplay is solid enough, it definitely ends up being more of a positive experience than a negative one for me. Graphically as well, this game is amazing. I know I'm repeating myself, but this is just not a setting you see a lot in games, and definitely not with this level of quality. Which, given that this is a remake, and it seems most of everything in this game was reiterated from other Mafia games, it would make sense that the presentation would be what would get the most focus on in this game, especially after how messy the game Mafia 3 was graphically. And this level of quality, along with a fitting soundtrack, does make a very unique experience, and I think it does help it a lot, pushing you through this story. So overall, this game is okay. It's not great, but it does everything well enough to be enjoyable, while the graphical quality pushes it a level above, and for that I'm giving this a 6 out of 10, being very close to a 7. While not great, it's still a nice experience, and I'm sure Mafia fans will enjoy. And for non-Mafia fans, or people who have not gotten into the series yet, this is a nice and simple entry to start on, even if I would not recommend to get it at full price, mostly because it is a simple story game without much replayability. Anyways, regardless, I'm glad to have played it, and I hope you enjoyed this review. Hopefully I was not too hard on it, and hopefully you will subscribe. I'm winking. Anyways, like, comment, all the things you can do on here. That would be very, very, very... Bye.